All good, as long as there's no feedback. So that led this guy, Mark Andreessen, who's a famous Silicon Valley investor, to come up with this expression. I don't know if you've heard of it before. Software is eating the world. So what he's talking about there is everything that's physical is becoming software. Everything physical is becoming software. And a perfect example of that is your smartphone. So when I think of my dad, so particularly in the 80s, he'd be walking around with a big camcorder on his shoulder. We had like a ghetto blaster type stereo. We had a separate alarm clock. He had the phone in the living room that was cabled to the wall. He had a separate radio player, a separate torch, separate maps, like all these things, which are now just in there. They're apps. Pretty much everything there is now an app in your phone. Even police scanners, you can tune into the air traffic control towers. Everything is now an app. So software is eating the world. So what that means, though, is that any time you see something physical, there's an opportunity to convert it into something digital. So if you have any paper-based forms, you can convert it into an app. I've got a couple of examples, but even beyond those simple things, like anytime you see paper, think opportunity. Anytime you see paper, think, oh, I can convert this into something digital. But even shopping centres. So this is actually a subway in Korea. So you can see that's a train there. That guy's walking onto the train. Here, this is just an image of a supermarket shelf. So the workers come out of the building into the train station, waiting for the tube ride home. He's doing his grocery shopping. He's walking along, just scanning the items he wants. Goes into his shopping cart, he boards the train. In that case, in Korea, by the time he gets to his apartment, the delivery's there.
This is an actual thing already.
This is an actual thing already. Yep.
Stop it.
So they have market.
I don't want them listening to me, but I'd like to do my shopping.
What I'll talk about at the end is imagine if it just knows what you want and it's already at your door without you even having to do this thing. So that's where we're getting.
That's just weird.
But the beauty of this, I mean, they have market density. Unlike Australia, they have the population density where they can do that. It all makes sense. Here we have a few more constraints. But again, doing away with the supermarket, doing away with stock on shelves, doing away with inventory, doing away with refrigeration that's open because someone has to grab something. So there's so many efficiencies in that supply chain and how they're setting it up. Another random example of software eating the world is this car. So this was in downtown Vegas. We went and visited this car company. So they're a new car company. They're called Downtown Motors. They build cars, but they do it out of a factory that's probably about as big as this room. They build 2 cars at a time. And the way they do it is every part of this car is designed by someone online. So someone, a designer around the world, like a graphic designer around the world, would design this component. And then they have big industrial 3D printers. They print that and build the car. And it's all custom made to order like that, and it gets shipped. So it's a very different way of producing something. Obviously, there's certain things that aren't 3D printed, but the actual chassis, or not the chassis, but the paneling, the internals, they're all designed by different artists around the world. So you end up with this unique piece of art. So it's impacting all different sectors. So the question from this first bit, when we talk about software is eating the world, is what could you digitize? So in your own business, what could you digitize? And there's a couple of examples coming up, but that could be as simple as, creating checklists, creating digital forms, creating digital assets around what you do. But equally, I mean, if you're doing something in an infrastructure space, or you have clients doing something in infrastructure space, how do you completely re-engineer that business model? How do you take away the need for a physical footprint? And for example, like the South Korean subway station, maybe take the inventory digitally to your customers rather than them having to drive to you. So think about how can you digitize that. That's probably, this one now is a bit dated, this concept of software in the world. But think about those parts of the business that you could actually digitize. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yep. Cool. Next bit is prioritization of knowledge. So who in the room exchanges time for money? Yep. So obviously the problem with that is we only have so much time that's capped. So the only way that we can scale is to charge more for our time. So we can get better at what we do, we can describe the value of what we do, but at some point we hit a cap. So how do you bring scale to time for money? So this has been an issue that's been in accounting firms, like accountants, lawyers, you know, photographers, everyone. So one way, very simply, is to create online courses. We've seen a massive rise of online courses during COVID. Local PTs who can't train anyone anymore suddenly put up programs, and they're selling their programs all around the world. Hairdressers who had to shut down their salons were doing online courses to teach people how to cut their kids' hair at home. The rise of online content is just, it's gone nuts. You guys sound like you're crossing. The number one most watched category of anything on YouTube is educational content. People going on to learn things quickly. Universities right now, the work I do at QT, like they're struggling with how do we stay relevant when a 4-year degree is outdated by the time you finish it. In fact, it's
someone who's halfway through the stopped a 4-year degree.
Yeah. So in the US, there's a company called Galvanize that they recognise that graduates out of university are just not prepared for the real world. So they run them through short little intensive 6-week programs that teach them data science, that teach them web development, full stack development, and then put them into a job. And they have a 97% job placement rate. So you could convert your knowledge into an online course. So that's definitely something you could be doing with your business. Trish, definitely something you could be doing. You guys sound like you're already working in that space. Yeah. So absolutely an easy one to do. There's sites like Kajabi, there's learning management systems. You just pay a monthly fee, throw your programs on there. You're out there. Another interesting thing is something like yoga, right? So traditionally there's a yoga instructor. They have their studio, and maybe they work out multiple studios. Again, time for money. Only so much they can do. I don't know, are any of you familiar with Yoga with Adrian? Right. So I only discovered Adrian during COVID, and she has a net worth of $2 million. She has, I'm gonna get this wrong, I want to say it's 12 million followers. She creates just hundreds of videos on YouTube that you can watch for free. They range from like 15 minutes to 48 minutes. You can do yoga at home. She also has a member community. People subscribe to be part of her community. But this is her business model. She's incredibly successful at it. Every video she makes on YouTube now, in the life of that video, will make her $2,500 US. She has something like 750 million views of her videos in total. So that means roughly on the maths, she'll be making over $1 million US a year just from people watching her YouTube videos because of the advertising. So obviously, there's a lot of other yoga instructors on YouTube that don't have that sort of impact. And we can't all be the most dominant yoga instructor. But what she's built in terms of content, she's built a community, she's built a membership community, has been, for someone who would otherwise have a capped income with what they can do, has suddenly just been able to scale. Then there's someone, actually this might resonate for you. So have you heard Luke's story? Yeah. Yeah. So.
It's the one we don't talk about.
So my understanding of Luke's story, he was working in his parents' business, which did OH&S type compliance and audits. I think his first move, because it was very much time for money consulting, and the first move was to digitize their content into checklists and procedural manuals and ebooks and whatever else to be able to sell them. Then created an app, just basically does checklists. And that has now gone on to be significantly invested in. They have clients like Boeing, British Airways and others. I think, it doesn't actually say anything, but I think his company valuation hit 600 million at the start of this year, something like that. But again, took existing knowledge, an existing traditional business, converted it into digital assets and into an app. And got supported by some people who have obviously not been doing it. But a great story of how you can actually productize knowledge. So.
And started in Townsville.
And yes, absolutely. And recruited something like 75 software engineers, convinced them from around the world to relocate there. So the question out of this bit is, what can you prioritize? What knowledge do you have? Now, this could be, even if you're in the business of, you're a dairy farmer and you're producing milk, you might have knowledge in your process that could be used to train other dairy farmers. But equally, that dairy farmer might have the most amazing recruitment and staff training procedures to bring, I don't know, hands onto the farm, whatever. So they might be able to convert that into a training program. So when we talk about this stuff, like prioritizing knowledge, don't just think of what we do as an output, think about everything you do as a process. Because you might have something you do as a process which is world-class, or that other people want to know. So identifying little gaps, or sorry, little opportunities of IP that you might not even appreciate the value of what you're sitting on. But someone else comes in and goes, how did you do that bit? So what can you prioritize? So I've written out a few things here, courses and programs, but even simple things like templates, checklists, ebooks. And these are great feeders too in part of your marketing, like giving away your ebook, top 10 tips for whatever. Even like how to prepare for, so someone coming to you as a graphic design client that needs work, how do you prepare your brief for what you want? Here's how to understand what you might want. Here's some considerations when you come up with a new logo, whatever it is. So how do you digitize your knowledge, or prioritize your knowledge, sorry. That one all good? The next one, human-to-human business models. And this all comes about because we've all seen this. So as much of these are technology companies, they're really not, they're just new business models. So the technology that went into the first version of Uber, a 14-year-old kid could have written that out. It's not some amazing tech. Nowadays, there's a lot of smart tech in it. Like it'll actually predict where people are going to be in advance. And so the drivers get a hotspot map, the drivers know where to be, in predicting the rush. But when it first started, it wasn't that advanced. But what they did is create a new business model, and all of these are really new business models. They're marketplaces. We describe them as a two-sided marketplace. Two sides because the one customer segment is a driver, one is a passenger. Two sides because one is the guest, one is the property owner. So two-sided marketplaces, they're really hard to launch. They're a factor of 10 times harder than a normal business because you've got double the work and you've got to have critical mass to have a network effect. But if you nail it, they're incredibly sticky and effective. So this was a sign that we saw in Silicon Valley that I took a photo of, but there's no more B2B or B2C, no more business to business or business to consumer. Everything's going towards human to human. Example of that from Cairns is a company called Gather. So Jody founded this. They connect high quality chefs with anyone who likes meals at home. So they're basically bypassing restaurants. So we have all this overhead of restaurants, we have all this overhead of commercial kitchens. What if you could just have an amazing dining experience in your house with a chef who actually cooks it for you, so you have it in premises, or prepares the meal and you collect it, or prepares the ingredients and you make it. During COVID, they slightly pivoted and did ISO degustation parties, where everyone Zoomed from all around the place and they had celebrity chefs cooking meals, had live music streaming in. But again, what they're doing is connecting chefs with people who like meals, a two-sided marketplace. This is an example from downtown Vegas. So this is actually a mechanic workshop. But what's different here is that every mechanic who works there has their own business. So they pay a monthly fee for a bay in which there's all the tools, all the oils, everything they need to run the business of being a mechanic. They use someone else's premises. So it's like a gym membership. Yeah. Exactly like a hairdresser model. Yep. So they can get their own clients. The client's theirs, they bill them however they want, but they have everything provided for them. This is Stitch Factory, also in downtown Vegas. They do the same thing for fashion. So you pay a monthly fee, like a gym membership. It's sort of come up on the photo there, but you get access to all the sewing machines, the design tables, the fabrics, the materials, and they even helped you get it into Zappos, which is a big online retailer in the US. They'd help you get your product actually online, into online stores. But this sort of model, hairdressers are a perfect, salons are a perfect example of this, now becoming across all different sectors. And if you think about it, Uber's sort of the same. It's like enabled anyone who has the app to now have their own business. But for the customer, there's a consistency of services like this one, consistency of equipment, tools, oils, everything else. And interestingly now, looking at 3D printing. So 3D printing when it first started, pretty crap, pretty poor resolution, pretty poor quality. Now it's getting much finer. So you can 3D print now down to incredible quality, not just plastics, you can 3D print metal, fabrics. we've met about 6-7 startups in Silicon Valley that are 3D printing human tissue. We met one that's 3D printing blood cells. They're actually somehow using lasers from stem cells to actually create your own blood, more of your own blood. So in the future, we won't even need to donate blood anymore. They're 3D printing meat, so from cattle stem cells.
I'm not comfortable with that at all.
So the thing is, genetically, it's identical. It's just printed instead of, you know, millions of acres of land and hunter animals. But where this is going, so imagine Ikea in the future. So Ikea in the future could just be a website where designers from all around the world have created furniture.
Oh, when would you get your meatballs?
Yeah.
You know, I only go for meatballs.
Or you can order the 3D printed meatballs as well. But you'll go on and choose like some designer in the back of Kazakhstan who's made this amazing couch. You'll pay $1.50 for that design. And then you'll get it probably printed at your corner Australia Post, who has a big, massive industrial commercial 3D printer in all fabrics and everything. You just go pick it up and let you. So I'm not saying that's necessarily going to happen, but the technology is definitely there for that to happen. There are already 3D printing houses. There's a development in Dubai of 10,000 houses that have been 3D printed. They're pretty ugly, to be honest, but every 18 months,
It's an opportunity in
yeah. So I think that's the question.
We better get them quick.
And this is the thing, even though the technology is there, it doesn't mean everyone will use that one technology. But what are the opportunities in your industry? So rather than just thinking about your business now, think about your industry. Like what is the opportunity to actually do something, create a marketplace, just really shift the business model, right? We focus a lot on tech, but just think about the business model. Why do we do things the way we do it? How can we streamline this? So that's an opportunity. So far, so good? Yep.
Yeah, that one kind of blew my mind a little bit.
Pretty neat. Yeah. I've got a picture, I've got a video somewhere of the blood printing one. It's weird.
Is it also fair to say, because as much as like obviously I love the innovation space and that, but I guess even in the current climate where there's rich, there's poor, where people go forward, we go, you know what I mean, like all of those things. So as this moves forward, and even I guess if I think even in the context of just mining automation and so forth, there's this catastrophic fallout that's coming.
Yes.
In a space where we're currently already having mental health issues, and we've got that. So in terms of looking for that opportunity, like I think obviously there's some opportunity in that digitization of things, but also is it fair to say that the opportunity is from our social license point of view to create the opportunity where the companies, as you move forward, also be responsible for the mess you leave behind through that. And I think even as we move forward, I would hate to think that there's not some provision for the people that will also fall through the net and they already have and get further left behind and what that looks like, and then who comes in with that innovation at its basic level to not make it bad even worse.
Yeah, absolutely.
If that makes sense. Is it fair to say there's an opportunity in being able to do business that's still in that space, but on the back of it in a social license type opportunity? Yeah,
I think so. So, and I think it's already happening. So one of the trends I'll talk about is the rise of social enterprise, and the fact, even what I was saying before, the fact that people now care who they're buying from and why they do what they do and how they do what they do. We've seen a big rise in the circular economy. People want to know at the end of life of a product, what happens to that product? How does it degrade? Is there an opportunity to recycle or reuse? So I think it's already happening in consumer sentiment, and I think that'll just keep. There's huge issues with the divide. So I think it's 12. I probably got this wrong. There might be more now, but 12 countries have been experimenting with universal basic income. Because if you fast forward all this stuff, it gets to the point where who's working anymore, and what are we doing? So countries like Sweden's already experimented. Sweden, Finland, and a couple of others have been experimenting with what if you just pay the population a wage just to live? And that's really fascinating then, because no offense to accountants or anyone else, but I've always been curious. Like we have so much of our workforce, so much of our intellect and human capital employed in just admin. Whereas imagine if we all just had time, like, can we go explore actual space, or can we go cure cancer, or do stuff that actually matters? No offense to accountants when I say that, but you know what I mean? Like, imagine if we had this freedom where everyone was equal, everyone had a decent pay rate, and then what could we all do? So I think in the future, there's going to be a lot of challenges come up out of all this. The question is always that friction, what comes first? And I think we're going to get it wrong for a while, and then hopefully it'll correct. That's just my view. Subscription models. So this is definitely something I'd really encourage you all to think about, because this is a huge opportunity to convert anything you do from a one-off transaction into a subscription. And the reason is, you all know the cost of getting a customer is really high, and you hope your customer's sticky, maybe loyal, but doesn't it make sense if you paid that price of getting the customer that you keep a relationship with them? And subscription businesses, it comes from software. So many software companies now. In the old days, you'd go to Harvey Norman, buy Microsoft Office for $120, get your CD, bring it back, install it. Now you just pay a monthly fee and it's all there and it's constantly updated. And what that means for those companies is that this beautiful, predictable income every month. It's the most investable company, SaaS models, software as a service. It's just that recurring subscription. So now what we're seeing is other things in life shifting to subscription models. You guys all know self-driving cars. So I don't know the latest count. Last I heard, it was something like 14 states in the US have already legalized completely autonomous vehicles. But what they're saying is, if every car on the road was autonomous, then we'd need a fraction of the cars that are currently on the road, something like a quarter of the cars that are currently on the road. Because think of what your car does most of its time, parked up, doing nothing. Imagine if we just had a fleet that's driving itself around, and when you need your car, it comes back to you, drive where you want to go. They just don't stop. Why do cars need to stop and do nothing all day?
Where do they go when they're driving around though?
So that's a good question. So they will know where people, because they can predict where people will need to be picked up, so they'll move to that part of the city where we know South Bank in Brisbane, Friday night, people need to get home, let's go and move the swarm over there.
So you have a subscription to a drive test?
Yes. So this is downtown Vegas.
On Friday night, just like we used to in the taxi system. Yeah, line up.
So this is downtown Vegas. A successful founder there called Tony Shea bought 100 Teslas and built these solar array recharging stations. And for a monthly fee, you just have a subscription, and when you need it, you open your phone, call the Tesla, it drives to you, you get in, go where you want to go, get out. Next month, you need the truck version because you're moving house, you just upgrade your subscription, get the truck. So it's already happening.
And nobody's in those cars.
No, so there's only certain places where it's legalized at the moment for them to drive with no one in the vehicle. Most states, even in the US, you have to be in the vehicle. Even when it's driving itself, you have to be in it.
Do they have a break in the passenger seat?
No, the driver's seat only.
Carjackings go down because there's no one to steal from.
Yeah, so I'm not sure which states are where at the moment because there's been a few fatalities. The weakness is the computer vision in the car still has issues at certain points. So trucks at sunset crossing highways are an issue, but they'll like every 18 months that technology will double in quality.
Just like I honestly almost hit a motorcycle the other day. So
Yeah.
because of the blind spot in the car.
Yeah.
Yeah, human vision, like you can see why.
Oh.
Eventually that's going to become safer than a human, right?
Absolutely. So
Once they get that truck
if-
past. Yeah.
well, per kilometre, far fewer accidents. If you go on YouTube, you can see cases where like there's a dash cam in an Uber and it's suddenly done an avoidance technique and you can't see anything. But its radar has picked up through the two trucks in front that someone stopped. And so it's taken evasive action. Those two trucks have ploughed through and smashed into everything, but the car knew because it had technology that could see through where a human couldn't. So yeah, they're actually way safer. So Uber's moving autonomous. Uber's already trialing driverless vehicles.
Is that a truck or a car?
That's a car. So that's Uber's version of an autonomous vehicle.
The whole purpose of Uber was they don't have any
like Airbnb don't have any real estate, right? Housing was, that's what they hold.
Yeah, so this.
Saying Airbnb will have 3D printed apartments. Yeah.
I don't know what Airbnb will do, but Uber, I'm not sure if they'll own the fleet or people will potentially buy autonomous vehicles as an investment that will be out earning the money. So yeah, it's an interesting question. I don't know. The other thing Uber's doing is making Uber Air. These will be autonomous aircraft that come and pick you up and like drones.
It's a high subscription.
Yeah.
And anyone want to take a guess when this will launch?
Haven't they done it in 2025?
2024.
Yeah, so there's a few cities that have been trying it. Melbourne, it'll be in Melbourne in 2023. So as a trial program. And again, these will be early. There won't be many people using them. There'll be all sorts of bugs. It'll be super expensive. But every 18 months, that keep getting better and better. So what's happening now, they're predicting that ownership will cease to exist. So we're already seeing this happening. There's a movement called I think it's something like 100 possessions. But there's people in their early 20s who just, if they can't fit in a backpack, they don't want to have it because their life is about freedom. And so my kids, 7 and 9, more than likely won't own a car. They'll pay a subscription. Here in Australia, we're still stuck on property ownership. You know, big parts of Europe aren't. So they're even saying, you know, they may not even bother owning property because that'll fix them down in a world where you move. Again, these are just predictions. Most predictions of the future are wrong. No one predicted Twitter. There's a quote, you know, we all wanted hoverboards and we got 140 character text tweets. So no one, but this is just some ways of extrapolating on the current data to what might happen. But what is happening is, this is Nike. They've started a subscription service. So instead of you going and buying shoes and then maybe next month going, or next shoe purchase in a year going to Reebok, what they've started is a shoe subscription service for kids. You all know, I don't know about you, but my kids outgrow their shoes. We're on our 3rd pair of school shoes this year already, just because they're growing so bloody fast. But what they do is they come in a box with little adventures to do. So it's like, well, with these shoes, here you can go and do this adventure or this like treasure map search or these exercises or whatever, which is really smart. So parents are subscribing to this. They get, the kids outgrow the shoes, they get new shoes, they get new adventures. For the kids, it's fun. Toilet paper, you guys heard of Who Gives a Crap?
Yeah.
Toilet paper by subscription, absolutely killing it. Dollar Shave
I
Club.
wouldn't love it either, just saying. But I like the idea of it.
Yeah.
Oh, the concept, right? Purpose, right?
Yeah, good perky. Yeah, going back to purpose. Dollar Shave Club is similar. So for men, we, you know, this one targets men. You know, we shave, we use a certain amount. It's predictable. You use a certain amount of shaving cream, you supply. So this way you get quality products sent to you every month, just for a small fee. They're now doing it for laundry detergent. They're doing it for cleaning products. Like all these things that we go to Coles and buy on a regular basis. It's predictable consumption, turning into subscription services. But the beauty of it is, like particularly these guys, they've done away with a lot of packaging. They've done away with a lot of the overhead of transport, warehousing, in some cases, depending on what you're buying, like cooling and all this sort of stuff. So again, people are making conscious purchasing decisions.
See, that just killed me into like, you really want to train enough to as much cleaner as you should, because you've got 3 packs back up.
Yeah. It would be interesting if they shared the analytics. It's like other households are doing way more cleaning than you are. Yeah, so it ends up cheaper as well. I mean, for the consumer, they win.
And it's interesting, I mean, even in that lady startup, so, you know, that lady startup page, yes. It's surprising how many people you see, which is great, how many people actually on there that do ask about the environment friendly packaging and the, you know, all the eco-friendly stuff, which I think is really keeping that alone and a bit of where people.
Definitely.
You know,
Yep. So I think for those of you in the room, what is the opportunity to switch to a subscription model? So if it is the schools, just get every year they get a new set of programs. But what is that opportunity to switch what you're currently doing into a membership model? So that could be membership to a community, which is something I'll talk about. It could be consumable products. So if you know that part of what you're selling gets consumed and runs out at a certain point. But it could also be for updates, like if you've got a new version or new information or new whatever. So like even a graphic designer, you could have a subscription service. You get so many pieces of artwork created each year. And even if you don't use them, we'll do a brand refresh or a brand audit every 12 months for you or something like that. So how do you create it into an ongoing engagement? Next one is looking at predicting what the customer wants. So the ones so far have been, I know some of it was a bit out there. Some of what's coming next is a little bit more out there. But how do you actually predict what your customer wants? So for some of you, you may already know this. You may already know my customers always order in December, this, and they want this, or this time of year they don't order. Like there's certain patterns in a lot of purchasing decisions. But now with data analytics and things like Facebook ads and other things, we can actually take that to the extreme. This is a case from Target. This is back, I think this was in 2012. But this dad in the US kept getting advertising sent to him from Target and on email, and anytime he went to a website, he was getting for baby products. And it really, for whatever reason, this guy, it wasn't just like delete it, ignore it. It really pissed him off. So he kept harassing Target. Why are you sending me all this bloody stuff on baby products? Stop. I'm not interested. And someone at Target actually took the time to look it up and go, what the hell's wrong with our algorithm? Why are we doing this? And it turns out Target knew that his 14-year-old daughter was pregnant before he did. And in this case, the daughter knew she was pregnant but hadn't told the parents. But she'd gone in and made certain purchases in store. And because every time you make a purchase, obviously you come to a card, there's transactions. Even if you use like your rewards cards, everything's recorded. That's purely a marketing, tracking, targeting activity. So that's why they were doing that. But now what they're able to do is actually predict you before you even know. And that's something I'll talk about in a second. But Amazon, who now have drone delivery services in the US, they claim that with their data on Amazon, the store, they can predict what people are likely to purchase. So if you purchase these 10 books, more than likely you're going to purchase these 10 books. So now what they're saying is rather than wait for you to order them, we're just going to ship them to your house.
That's what the wine clubs have done a lot.
Yeah. Yeah, the wine clubs, the wine subscription services, they make total sense. And then so basically you just get home, there'll be a box on the door, the computer says you want this, turns out you don't want that one, you send it back. But for them, they're good, they've got sales, they don't care about the return rate on that, and they'll just keep optimizing that. So Amazon are going to start that soon. It sounds crazy. I mean, Domino's are doing drone delivery now too. There's drone service on the Gold Coast for lifesaving, and on the first day of the trial, it actually rescued 2 young kids that were dragged out. So like this is more on delivery, but that ability to predict what people want. Have any of you watched The Social Dilemma on Netflix? You watched it? Did it freak you out?
Very much.
Yeah.
Only because the guys that were actually part of it are almost in sort of irrelevant network. They are concerned about where it's going and stuff like that, and they're actually at the forefront of it, and now they're going, shit, what's going to be created?
Yeah.
And that, I think I tapped out about halfway through.
Yeah. It's worth watching. There's another one called Cambridge Analytica, which was more around the US election. You should watch that one too. It's about how you can take data and then how you can manipulate information that's presented to people to alter how they behave. So there's a guy that we know at Facebook, and he shared some of the stuff that they do and some of the insights they get from it. And it's really fascinating, the fact that if you show 2 different groups of people, 2 different, like if I just show this side of the room, on your Facebook feed, I'm only going to show the negative posts from your friends. You won't see the happy posts from your friends. And I'll do the opposite on this side. You guys are more likely to post something negative, act negative. You're more likely to post something positive and act positive. And that's just the basic level. Like that was back 6 years ago, I think I did that. So it's not like that show's talked about. It's not malintended, but it has it's a pretty serious concern. The other thing to look at there is dopamine detox. So there's some good videos on YouTube about dopamine detox, how our addiction to these are actually causing us to not be able to do hard things anymore, and how we need to actually be bored. It's really important to be bored as part of our mental health. So definitely check that out. But the key point of this one is what can you predict with your customers? So looking at what are people consuming, what patterns are there, and what I mean by this isn't you go and ship 10 books to their door necessarily, but imagine just calling them a month in advance. Hey, next month, we know you normally place this order. We know you're coming to this cycle. Would you like to get that sorted now? Like good customer service, good human care. Like not so much about the business side, but actually how can you predict what your customers need and better service and help. The other part of that then is looking at how else can you capture those insights. So how else can you capture data to better help your customers? And one thing I'd say there is just pick up the phone and talk to people. Like just go and talk to people. Even say, oh, I've got this one, set up calendar invites. I was saying this to my dentist. My dentist is awesome, and you know they'll ring up regularly and say, "Do you want to book in for your next one?" I'm like, just pre-schedule in my calendar a recurring 6 monthly. Whatever's in my calendar, I do. So just don't even call, just send a calendar invite. She did, and it's just in my calendar. And it's go now, go. It's like, why don't more doctors do that? Why is it up to us to call the doctor, to book him, to get our blood? It's like, I'm at this age, you should know what I need to do. Just book it in my calendar. Right? So that's where it's heading. That all makes sense? Yeah. Are we getting action items that we can do, or are we just, yeah? What's to think about? Okay. I think this might, oh no, one more after this one, but this one's a good one. The profit for purpose. So this comes back to a lot of that conversation. We're seeing a massive rise of social enterprise. Have any of you heard of a B Corp? No? Yes. So in Australia, we have either for-profit or not-for-profit. If you're for-profit, the directors are legally obligated to maximise returns for shareholders. And if they don't do it, there's penalties. If you have a not-for-profit, the directors are not allowed to return anything to members. So if you own a not-for-profit, the members can't get like a dividend. They get paid for work, but they can't get a dividend. So in the US, they invented this model in between called a B Corp. And basically, you can make a profit, but it has to be for a social good. So your primary purpose is to do social good, some sort of benefit, but you're allowed to make a profit. You can be B Corp certified here in Australia. It doesn't carry a legally binding thing, but it definitely, it's a compliance, you self-audit, meet that criteria, you can be B Corp certified, it's a signal to the market. And consumers are increasingly looking at things like this as an indicator of, do they want to buy from you? And a good example, I don't know if you guys have heard of World's Biggest Garage Sale.
Yeah.
Yep. So basically looking at circular economy. All these goods that normally go to the landfill. My brother used to work at the Salvation Army, and all this stuff that gets donated there, anything that's got an alcoholic brand on it, they immediately discard because they don't want to sell anything that's got an alcoholic brand. If it was a brand new whatever, immediately into landfill. So Yaz founded World's Biggest Garage Sale. This is one of their garage sales that they ran. But now what they're doing is solving this problem for major brands. The ones we can talk about are things like Officeworks. R.M. Williams was announced today. A very massive company out of Switzerland is looking at all this stuff, all these products that they sell that don't sell. What do they do with them? Normally they go to landfill or they get dumped on some market. They're basically gifting them to World's Biggest Garage Sale and saying, make sure these go somewhere useful. But even things like old t-shirts, they recycle into pillowcases or cushions. So it's a great business model, absolutely killing it. And the last of the 7 that I'm going to talk about is communities, not customers. So Harley Davidson did this really well. I didn't know this, but apparently in the 80s, Harley Davidson almost went bankrupt. And they reinvented themselves. One of the ways they reinvented themselves was to create a culture around the bike. And so they created HOG, the Harley Owners Group. They created Facebook groups, and obviously now there's a lot of like individual private groups that get formed as well. But it became a community. So they created a culture and a community. And Lego looked at that because Lego in the early 2000s was about to go bankrupt. And they're like, how do we reinvent ourselves? And they went, let's see what Harley did. And they copied it, and they created some communities. So one community, so this is, you go on LikeNet, this is still what the website looks like, it's terrible. But that was just a community for people, it was mostly older men in their 40s and 50s who grew up with Lego, who loved it, would just go on and talk about things that they created and share what they designed. But they would come up with all these ideas like, wouldn't it be cool if Lego did this? And of course, Lego's there, and they go, okay, we'll go do that. So there's all these examples of things that Lego have created for kids that came from these guys in their 50s just talking about it in this community. And then Lego went a step further. They created Lego Life, because young kids like mine, they're not on social media. Who do they post their awesome new Lego build to? So they made maps so they can share it with other kids their age in a safe way. And again, Lego's getting all this data. I'm like, oh, geez, that pirate ship is like getting these comments and this and this and this and this. These other ones aren't moving. So another great way to build community. Building community, though, should be of value to the community, not to the business, but always there will be a value to the business. And then they created Lego Ideas, where anyone can go on and suggest an idea for a Lego thing. And then there's a community on there, so it's your job to then get others to buy into your idea, it gets voted on. And some of their top selling products now have come from here. Does someone come up with an idea, post it on here? But again, community mechanism. So there's two parts of this. One is, how do you create an opportunity for your community's voice to be heard, your customer's voice to be heard? Because I don't think enough of us actually spend time listening to our customers and how can we help them? And then second, how do you create a community where they can share from each other and learn from each other and do things together? And Gymshark is a good example of that. Have any of you heard of Gymshark? Yep. So clothing, exercise, fitness clothing. So it was a young guy, 19-year-old Aussie guy, started Gymshark. As of, I think it was 2 or 3 months ago, it's now worth, and that was in 2012. So what's that, 8 years later, it's worth $1.5 billion. He's in London. He still owns something ridiculous. It's like 80% of the company, something like that. It's like, I can't remember, but it's ridiculous. But a huge business, the way he built it is very much community. So they're very transparent. Everything they do, they publish. It's like, we got a new office. We sold 10 t-shirts today. Like literally when they started, you go back and watch their videos, they shared everything because the story was about them. I want to buy from them. Look, they're hustling. They're trying to make this work. It's 9-year-old kid. Awesome. I want to buy that experience. The gym clothing is like an extra. They have a community one. So when you sign up for their community, you get access to training programs, nutrition plans. You're part of a community. You can talk to other people because all those people have something in common. So they're all there talking away and chattering to each other. But meanwhile, they're buying the Gymshark product. It's an amazing story to watch. But just a perfect example of the value of the community. Everything that, like I personally launched now, is all about community. It's like what we deliver is secondary. The primary thing is curating an awesome community. And then Vino Mofo, we're talking about wine subscription. Vino Mofo ran a wine blog for 2 years before they sold a single product. It was just a community of people who love wine. And let's talk about wine. And let's find out what people like. And what do they want? What are they looking for? Then they started selling wine. So how do you create a customer community of value? And I think that's the key point is it's got to be of value to the community. And the measure of its success is how the community talks to each other, not to you. So you want to measure how many interactions and conversations do they have. How are we going? Good? Is everyone just ready to throw the towel in? You still want to go to the pub? I'm happy to go to the pub. So look, it can be overwhelming. It can be a bit like, oh, wow, there's all that technology. What's that? How do we fit? The goal is really just provoke thoughts. And the other thing I'd say is you've got to skate to where the puck's going, right? So you need to know where things are heading and make sure that whatever you're doing is on that path. Doesn't mean your business might have a 5-10 year event horizon and then you're out, and you might completely skip whatever's going to happen. That's totally fine. But you're more likely to be successful if you're on the wave of what's happening. But what I'm going to quickly end on is just 2 examples, which are much more local and traditional businesses. So these guys, Technigrow, were a Gold Coast, I don't know what you call it, Gold Coast gardening service, basically, commercial. But they actually built up to the point where they had 90% of all the commercial contracts for any sort of green space in Queensland. Like, it was ridiculous. They're like, how do we keep growing? We can only hire so many people. We've pretty much got every contract now. So this is, when I say public green space, I mean things like sporting fields, council parklands, that sort of stuff. So they're like, okay, well, if we can't keep growing our revenue, let's look at our costs. So they looked at the grass and they worked out, well, the reason we have to mow these fields every 2 weeks is because this one type of grass, like this weedy stem, comes up. The actual underlying grass doesn't grow that fast. So you might notice on your own lawn, you see the little weedy stems, you've got to go mow it just because of those bloody little things. The actual grass itself hasn't grown. So they came up with a herbicide that took out just that particular strain, like that particular thing. And so they started spraying that, and it meant that they only had to go and mow the grass. I think it was about every 6 weeks instead of 2. But as they were spraying it, they're like, the spray's going in the wind, the spray would go everywhere. So like, okay, we need, like, has no one invented a better way of spraying the herbicide stuff? So they invented this, which looks so ridiculously simple. Just this way, it's a spray head. So these little brushes just stop the wind wasting on spray. So instead of having to spend heaps on this spray, they can now use much less, which is better for the environment, reduce their costs. Anyway, this spray head, they ended up licensing, I can't remember who it was, I don't think it was John Deere, but they ended up licensing the design for that to a major manufacturer of tractors and machinery. And they sold the commercial groundskeeping company. And now that family is a family business. They just sit on the royalties from the IP. And they're making more money from that than they did with doing this thing that had like hundreds of staff, all that stress. So this again goes back to, that was their unique little source. That's what they did really well. And it turns out they solved it for themselves. And anytime you solve something for yourself, there might be another billion people who have the same problem and want that solution too. So I think it's a perfect example. Traditional business, family owned, not a high growth tech company. They just looked at, how do we do our shit better? If we solve it for ourselves, maybe we can solve it for others. Another example of that, which will sound a bit random, but coin-operated machines in shopping centres, right? Like just kiddies' rides. They have a problem, which is that they experiment with a price above $2 and people stop using it. It's like, if it's more than $2, parents are like, I don't do extra coin, too expensive, I'm not going to do it. So they had a capped earning. But also the machine would get a jam. They wouldn't know until the technician went out 2 weeks later. They had no way of making it a good experience for customers. They didn't know if their service agents were ripping them off because they had no idea what money was in there. So this company, LedgerCoin, again, family business, mum and dad and one son, they had machines around the country, and they're like, we need to fix this. So they actually got my business in to design something to retrofit where we could see every dollar that went through the machine. If there was a coin jam, we'd get it in real time. We'd have a motion sensor, so if the coin went in but the machine didn't move. Every time the service technician went to site, they had to scan on, scan off. So they had all this real-time reporting of every dollar in every machine predicted. But the real part was the app, because now what they could do is enable people to use credit card to activate a machine. So you walk up to the machine in the mall and just like, yep, go. And it'll just charge down from your account. But even if, you know, grandma had the kids, you at home as a mum could just activate that machine remotely. And then what you could do is have a subscription service. So you just pay $15 a month, unlimited rides anywhere. So now they've got a subscription business out of a traditional coin-operated machine. Now they're not sending people to site as often because they don't have to empty coins every 2 minutes. They're not getting coin jams, so the machines are more operational. They're getting bulk purchases of people. So what ended up happening, pretty much put out 300 machines, and they got acquired almost straight away by the biggest competitor. So that family walked away with a nice little retirement. So, and it was just purely for that technology. So again, solve the problem for yourself, and chances are someone else will want that solution. That's it.
That's it.
How are you feeling? Is there any questions or anything you want to talk about? Challenge? Yeah,
How exactly does a 3D meat printing work?
I don't know. I know they use stem cells, and that's as much as I know. I know the first one that was produced in the lab cost £10 million to produce and made it into a burger, and because of this was in London, and because of the food regulation rules, they couldn't sell it. The only people who could eat it were the scientists who made it. And they said it tastes just like meat, but it had no flavour because there's no fat in it. And the challenge was, how do they get fat into the meat? So it's just pure lean, just the meat, no fat.
You have that on the chicken.
But I don't know what's happened to it since then. But you can Google it. Like, go on YouTube, there'd be heaps of places doing that now. Yeah.
I've got a question. So the B Corp certified stuff, where would you go to see more about that?
Google B Corp or Benefit Corporation. There's a website, which I should know. I think it's just called literally bcorp.org. Yeah. Look for that B, the brown or maroon B logo. Yeah.
Yeah, I think I've got a link to that on my computer too.
And is that a different initiative for your, than your for-purpose organisations, or is that a banner under which your for-purpose as opposed to not-for-profit exists?
Yeah, it's a good question. So it's just one certification that you can use. It's probably the more prevalent. There's been it was the first that I came across. There's probably lots of others that have come up since. You don't need to have it to be like a social enterprise. Like you can do social good, even as a for-profit company, you can still do social good. The B Corporation is more a signal to your customers that you take this stuff seriously, and there's certain things you have to meet, like criteria you have to meet, certain practices you have to have, and you can be audited at any time by B Corporation. So it's just like that mark that, yeah, we take this seriously. Yeah. Is that a question?
No, I just kind of like an observation statement. I think going through that, I was in equal measures about where it's heading from a personal point of view. So yeah. I probably thought of the spook in it was less about business pivoting and diversifying, and more just personally what that does in my head as far as how comfortable I am with more things, picking up more things. And I'm comfortable with the just give an example, because you guys might have done the same thing. You know how the more you expose yourself to, say, the Kerwin Mays or the people that train in the marketing and stuff, I get desensitized to that because I'm aware of the process. So therefore I'm like, oh no, it's going to manipulate it because I know how you're doing it. So where I bought in for so long, I almost get to the point where I know too much that I've lost the value now, because now I feel like I'm in the wheel of it, and so then I can't re-engage.
Yeah.
So similarly, I guess, personally I get really weird about being part of a machine that I don't have personal control over all the stuff and things that's measuring and monitoring. And I've done a bit of looking into that data mining, and from a business point of view, I can see the value in it. But from a business point of view, I guess I saw the opportunity in the fact that there will be that transition point, and that transition point for me is where I see the opportunity. So while I'm not the only one, I probably is going to be not quick on that uptake at that level, or if someone's doing it really well. Is there simplicity? So say, for example, with all the data mining and the customers, and it's incredibly mature where they are now, and we're not even seeing yet all of that with the digital twins and all the bits that's happening. And I think even there's an opportunity that I'm sort of playing around with one of the domains now, is just simplicity of saying, if we just wanted to know, like we're pretty basic in Australia, basic in a respectful way in Australia, and I think that there's a massive market of people that go, if we just want to know if we're into gay marriage, or if we just want to know if we're into this, or we want red cars or blue cars, just like, hey, Australia. Do you know what I mean? So I'm kind of, in my head, I'm kind of like, okay, there's potentially this opportunity in between. of saying you can get caught on the wheel.
Yep.
Because it's going to happen anyway.
Yep.
Or there's a really simplistic way to maintain bits that people do like in the simplicity of the normal way that we live.
Yep.
And then capture that as an opportunity.
Yep.
If that makes any sense.
Yeah, I think you're able to draw insights from data. I distinguish it this way. So there's data and we can draw insights from that data. Where it's gone though is the next level, which is then manipulating people by presenting different, altering the world you see. And it's going to become even more of an issue when we have augmented reality and virtual reality, where you literally can't distinguish. And we've already hit this point. Like look at fake news commentary. Like we've hit this point where how do you distinguish? There's services now that can mimic someone's voice just after they say 20 to 50 words. They can mimic it, so you basically can't tell the difference. So how do you even know if you get a phone call from me? How do you know it's me? Like, so this is we can draw insights and then we can manipulate. And I think what companies are starting to do though, there's a number of companies now that say we won't use any like data science is probably too broad a statement, but we won't use any techniques to do X, Y, Z, or we won't use your data in this way. Like they're making statements. Because I think what will shift is the consumer sentiment.
Right, yeah.
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 And like what you're talking about is huge. I mean, rewind, we were in Silicon Valley 5 years ago, and there was a lot of tension even back then. Actually, it would have been about 6 years. Even then, there was a lot of tension where the Google employees, there's a bus that takes Google staff from San Francisco City down to the Valley, and protesters were like smashing those buses with bricks. Staff were told, do not wear your Google employee shirt because they've been attacked in the street. Because even then there was this tension, like technology is moving too fast. It's causing this change in our city. It's causing these, and there's always this, I think ethics is always behind. But there'll be a point where it flips, but yeah.
And even that availability already, you know, like we're already being fed more of how we already think.
Completely.
And then so how do we, so someone like me, I like to hear other people's opinions and I like to be challenged.
Yep.
And I find it challenging if what I already think is the only thing that's fed back to me.
Yeah. Yeah.
So.
And this is where, like, to bring it back to a more fundamental thing, this is why diversity on your team is so critical. Like, you need diversity of thinking. Like, not just diversity of gender, not just diversity of age, like, not just diversity of race and everything. You need diversity of thinking. And all of those voices need a mechanism to be heard. And so that's why the other technique you can use is this red team. So you can have a red team, and their goal is to always have the counter argument. So whatever decision you're going through, just always have someone who's looking at different data, looking at tell me the opposite. But in a life context, that's much harder to do. Yeah. Cool.
Just what you were saying before about that. There's a Korean fellow that lives on the road with my dad, and they do this weird little exchange of herbs and groceries. Even though he can't speak a word, he kind of communicates with my dad on his push bike for his young nephew.
Yeah.
And yeah, they do like a little, there's no radishes or, you know, whatever that might be. And Dad said the weirdest thing the other day, he came out with an app, it was a translator app, but it wasn't just that Dad said he'd act his own voice.
Right.
Translated to the Korean, in Korean, from Dad's tone, who's a Geordie.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? But he said, yeah, he was Korean, but it had all of his...
The nuances of his voice.
Yeah, so you know how usually it's like a Siri type thing, like he's speaking that do it. Yeah, he's like, it's me and my voice speaking in Korean.
Yeah.
The trickiest thing you've heard.
It's phenomenal, like where that technology is going. So the voice is already at that point. There's a music startup in Brisbane that's got AI making songs, and their goal is to get one to win like a Grammy or something like I don't know, but phenomenal.
It's awesome. I think it's amazing the direction it's going, but I think that it's definitely innovation opportunities within the innovation, if that makes sense.
Yep.
Like social commercialization within the trajectory of innovation without having to be in the front of that.
Yeah, absolutely. I want to respect everyone's time. Thank you for listening. And I'll hang around for a bit if anyone does want to chat more. I think there's some amazing cupcakes still up the back.
There are, yes.
Unless that's what you just ran to eat there.
No, I was going to fill off, I thought, no, I should just wait. That's me, though, I'm always cleaning up. So yeah, get in, get it, so we can get out.
Yeah.
Awesome, thanks so much.
Yeah, thanks for coming on.
Nice to see you. Take care. I'll see you tomorrow night.
All right, thanks so much.
So,
See you, Leanne. See you tomorrow.
Sure thing, Will. Yeah.
See you guys. Hey, see ya.
Yeah, so hopefully
It was great. It was really great. My work, actually.
when do you catch up with Sharon about?
I'm not sure. Am I meeting you this year tomorrow, Aaron?
Yes.
Yeah.
I'll be passing till morning.
Wow.
Yeah.
12 till 1.
Yeah, I'll be here.
Yeah. All right. I'll be lunch.
Okay. Well, I say
See ya. Bye.
Yeah, I don't think we've got.
Yeah.